How is it? How is it up in the Northeast Kingdom today?
Good. It's sweating out there.
It's what?
It's hot out there.
It's raining.
Well, you know, that's unusual for this time of year. Both my wife and my mother were born in the Northeast Kingdom, so I have on my computer a lot of times I'll check what the weather is up there in the day, but I hadn't checked yet today. But you probably have questions other than weather. Who would like to start?
Me.
And okay, go right ahead. Give me your name.
Alexis.
Alexis, go ahead.
What is currently being done at the federal level to address the inequality between black and white unemployment?
I think that's a very good question. You know, the Civil Rights Act of 1964 has it prohibits discrimination in hiring on the basis of race or religion or nationality, which is important. It's improved things, but not enough. There are too many pockets of minority unemployment, not only black, but other minorities. And a lot of the very responsible companies have been working very hard to help in both the educational systems and other things in there, but we still have a long way to go. We also have to have a different minimum wage. I don't think that the current minimum wage is a livable wage. People can't raise a family on it. People can't plan to go on to school. So there's a lot of work that has to be done. And until we improve it and make it similar around the country and equal opportunities for whites and blacks, then we suffer as a country.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Andrew.
Hi, Andrew.
Consider how many problems there are that need to be solved. Where do you think racial inequality fits in? How important is it?
Well, I think it's very important. We don't look at all the problems in this country on a 1, 2, 3, 4 basis. And we have problems in medical research. We keep working, spend the money seeking cures for cancer, for Alzheimer's, for cerebral palsy, for a number of other illnesses. What do we do to keep our country safe? But I think the racial inequality has to be considered a very, very important part. We have, we all live in probably the whitest state in the country, but it's important to us because if you have inequality anywhere in the country based on your race or based on your religion or based on where you came from, the whole country suffers. I mean, we are a diverse nation. We're supposed to be a diverse nation, but it means equality for everybody, because if one large segment of population is suffering in a direct or indirect way, we all suffer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Dustin.
Go ahead, Justin.
How much do you think Americans' past history of racial discrimination continues to impact the opportunities of black people today?
Well, I think it does impact that. We've seen in some states where there are blatant efforts to stop or to lower the ability for people to vote in areas that are predominantly black or predominantly Hispanic. So that is happening. Now, is it different than when I was your age? Yes. The idea that we could have an African American as president back when I was your age, people would have thought it could never happen. They didn't think we could have a Catholic as president until President Kennedy was elected. But I've talked about this many times with President Obama, and you know, he'll be the first one to tell you that the fact that he got elected didn't end all racial discrimination in this country by any means. Okay?
Yep.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Sean. My question is, how much of a problem with unemployment and welfare do you think is caused by people simply not wanting to work?
You know, I haven't seen many people who are getting unemployment benefits or welfare of any sort, food stamps, things like that, who are happy with that. I think they'd much rather have a decent job. And one of the things you see, sometimes a company in Vermont or elsewhere will advertise that they're going to have 5 jobs available or 10 jobs available. A relatively small number, but they're going to be decent paying jobs. You will see a line of people, many of them unemployed, they'll stretch for blocks. They'd much rather work than be unemployed. Are you going to find somebody who may be different? Sure. The vast majority of people that studies show this, and certainly my own experience, unemployed, find us a job. We want a job. We want a place to go to work. And I think that what we should be doing, people in government, state government, federal government, everything else, should be working to provide jobs. I do that all the time, trying to bring jobs to Vermont. I use the REAP program to bring jobs to the Northeast Kingdom, which has historically had higher unemployment. And over again, people will stop me in a grocery store or walking down the street in Vermont and say, you know, I hated it. I was drawing unemployment compensation, or I had to go on welfare to feed my family, and I just hated every minute of it. But then, and they'll name the company was hiring, and I was able to get a job. And I'm working the night shift, or I'm working split shifts, or I'm doing anything else, but it's so much better. I'm now able to support my family. So I think the most important thing we should do is create jobs.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sean.
Hi, my name's Emma. How did living through the civil rights movement in the 1950s and 60s influence the way you think about race as a senator?
Well, that's a good question. I was born in Montpelier, and we did not see racial issues that much as a child growing up in Montpelier. We had one African-American family, a man who was a very popular teacher, actually got elected to alternate to the Vermont legislature. But when I went away to law school at Georgetown in Washington, D.C., in the 60s, you could see the remnants of discrimination. You could see there were still some signs on the on water fountains, white and colored, even back then. And it was shocking to me as a Vermonter to think that you would do something like that. And the civil rights movement was really, really starting up. We had marches in Washington. I was glad to be part of that. And in law school, our professors were talking to us about why laws of discrimination are wrong, and I agreed with them. And then after I got into the Senate, I got to know very well Congressman John Lewis, and he's a hero of mine. He was, when they were trying to cross the bridge during the civil rights movement, he was a man who was clubbed and nearly died, and the images of that suddenly shocked the whole nation. You had a lot of people, like those of us in Vermont, who hadn't seen any of this. Some they saw it and were shocked by it, That's kind of brought President Johnson around to push for the for civil rights legislation. So I would say as a young lawyer, I was influenced by it. I was in cases I tried when I came back to Vermont, and even when I became state's attorney, I was well aware that we still had a long way to go. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Kelsey. What do you think are the most important advancements we've made since the Civil Rights Movement in terms of racial equality?
Well, I think the Voting Rights Act of 1965 is one of the most important. You know, if you have the right to vote, and you know you can vote, and you do vote, that's the best way to start changing things. And then we renewed that Voting Rights Act. I remember being there with President George W. Bush when we had passed it virtually unanimously in the House and unanimously in the Senate. Republicans and Democrats came together, and we were really, really happy. We reauthorized it 4 times in both Democratic presidents, Republican presidents. But the Supreme Court back in 2013 gutted the Voting Rights Act, and as soon as they did, 2 or 3 states immediately changed the way you could register to vote, which done in such a way that various groups of people were cut off from voting or were hindered from voting. Well, you have to have the right of everybody to vote, but then you got to exercise that right. I worry very much when there's a low turnout of voting. We in Vermont usually have one of the highest in the country, but when you have people have so much at stake, who you elect, that whether you're voting for a Republican or voting for a Democrat, the most important thing is to get out there and vote. And I don't know whether your school is one of those that's used for voting booth during votes. Do you know? Do your teachers know?
We're not. No, it's not.
Because in some places the school gym is something a place set up in where I live down in Middlesex, just outside of Montpelier. It's a very small town. We have a town hall. We vote there, and it's paper ballots. I just think I voted every single election since I was old enough to vote. It's such a thrill to. That's why we're so different in other countries. Let me just tell you a short story. There was a Central American country that had gone through civil war and all that, and finally people could have a chance to vote. I was asked by the then president to go down and be one of the observers on the election. And I was having a hard time sleeping. The election was the next morning, so I got up around 4 o'clock in the morning. I thought I'd go out and take some photographs. The sun came up. Long line of people were out there. Some had walked for 2 days to get there. Now they're going to have their first time they could vote. They've been lined up since 2 or 3 in the morning. And in the area that I was covering, the town I was covering, by noon, 98 or 99% of the people were eligible to vote had voted. Now they had to face gunfire and everything else before to vote. Now they could finally vote. We shouldn't take it for granted. We should always vote. And I'll never forget that. And so I make sure I vote. So urge your parents to vote. And when you're 18, vote. Vote for whomever you want, but vote.
Thank you.
Enough of my lecture. Thank you for your question.
Hi, my name is Logan. Do you believe that the KKK should have the freedom to speak freely and spread their ideas?
Well, they do have the freedom to speak freely. You know, the Supreme Court has said that in our First Amendment. I think our First Amendment is important. I condemn the kind of speech that they come up with because it's hate speech. But what makes us different than most countries, you can speak, but you cannot threaten people. And then we have the Ku Klux Klan flyers you saw in Burlington recently. The state's attorney is investigating that as a possible hate crime. If you're doing it to intimidate people, then that's wrong. Just as the Ku Klux Klan did with everything from lynchings to destruction of people's property. There's no First Amendment right for that. There's no First Amendment right for violence. There's no First Amendment right in hurting people. But speaking out, you know, I get letters all the time that some people say some fairly hateful things, which I totally disagree with, but they've got the right. You know, my parents had a printing business in Montpelier. I grew up believing the First Amendment. The First Amendment gives you the right to say whatever you want. Also gives you the right to practice any religion you want, or none if you want. And that is a guarantee of diversity in our country. If you guarantee diversity, you guarantee a democracy. But I think that some of the things the Ku Klux Klan says is very hateful. And I think that we ought to stand up and say, no, here's what we believe in. We believe that people shouldn't be discriminated because of their race or their religion or whatever else. And I think the most important thing that should be done when you see hateful speech like the Ku Klux Klan is to speak out and say why you disagree. Okay?
Okay.
Did you want to add anything to that?
No,
Huh?
no.
Okay. Because, I mean, if you disagree with me on any of these things, you know, speak up. Here's your chance to grill a U.S. Senator and tell them why you agree or disagree.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Destiny. We've learned a lot about the deaths of Michael Brown, Tamir Rice, Freddie Gray, and Eric Gardner. Which one of these deaths are you concerned of the most?
They all concern me, and I can think of, in one of them especially, I was at my home in Vermont, Middlesex, late in the evening. We'd been watching the news. My wife and I had to get a call from the Attorney General. He talked about it. He was somewhere with the president. The president came on. We talked about it. And I've had long, long talks with President Obama about these. You can't rank them as which ones were. They shouldn't be happening. What's happening in Chicago right now, for example, should not be happening in any city in America. I'm proud of my 8 years I spent in law enforcement, but nobody can justify police officers just shooting a man's fallen, just keep on shooting like we've seen there. And then to find that there's been a cover-up of it. This is wrong. You have to have the ability of people being treated the same no matter what the color of their skin is. I believe this very, very strongly. I want to see everybody in my family treated alike. I want to see everybody in your family. I want to see everybody in the families of people I meet in the street. And we do know that people have been singled out because of their race, and that's wrong. That actually diminishes every single one of us as Americans. You can't discriminate against people and say, well, this person has this religion or that religion, or this person's skin color or that, or this person, their parents don't have as good a job as my parents do, so we can just, you just can't do that. We have to be treated alike. We're Americans.
Thank you.
Okay? Thank you.
Hi, my name is Richard. Even though Americans have become less racist, how many do you think unconscious
bias and discrimination still affect black people?
Well, I think in some parts of this country, especially, you still see it. There's an expression called DWB, driving while black. And it's been demonstrated in some parts of the country, blacks are stopped far more times than whites for exactly the same thing. I know a man who at the White House. He's assigned as one of the personal photographers to the President of the United States. He and his security clearance, he's alone with the President of it. It's just the two of them in the room. He flies on Air Force One with the President, rides in his car with the President. Is there anything else? But he's been stopped driving within the speed limit because he's coming back from work at the White House, and he's stopped and being questioned very roughly by a white police officer. Then he shows him his White House all access badge, but very few people have this. It means they can go anywhere in the White House. And then suddenly he's treated with respect. Well, that's wrong. He should have been treated with respect anyway. And he's a very fine young man and fine family man. And so that still happens today. Other parts of the country happens even more. It should not happen. So keep that in mind when you're dealing with people. Don't make judgments based on what somebody looks like. Make judgments based on who they are and how they act.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Corbin. We learned about the findings of the DOJ report on Ferguson. How widespread do you think these types of problems are in police forces around the country?
Well, I think as we saw in Chicago this past few days, unfortunately, these problems are more widespread than we'd like. I work with a lot of police officers, and my position is certainly as chairman of the Judiciary Committee and as ranking member, because as I said, I had time I spent in law enforcement. I believe very strongly in good law enforcement, but it has to be law enforcement that treats all Americans alike. I mean, we're all Americans. And know whether you're a police officer or a teacher or a physician or a shop owner, you shouldn't say, I'll treat this American one way, but I'll treat that American a different way. The whole country suffers when that happens. And maybe the only good thing about Ferguson and Chicago and others is this becomes more public, just like some of the things that became public during the civil rights movement in the 60s. As they became more widely public, there's an effort to change them. And George Wallace standing in the schoolhouse doors and things like that, it changed. Maybe as some of these egregious things happen, they'll change. I mean, we're fortunate that we have good law enforcement in Vermont. Colonel Birmingham, the head of the Vermont State Police, I think works extremely hard to make sure the Vermont State Police doesn't do that. And then we should be proud of them for it. But all law enforcement has to. I think most police departments want to do the right thing. They've got people, members of the department who are not, and get rid of them. Okay? Thank you.
Brady.
Hi, my name's Raiden. When you think about racial inequalities with regard to wealth, incarceration, employment, healthcare, and education, which concerns you the most?
You know, they all concern me. The fact that they even exist concerns me, but yet every single objective study in this country shows they exist. Take an incarceration. Far greater, disproportionate, a number of blacks are locked up. and I'll give you an example of what happens. We have a great disparity in our drug laws. If you're a lawyer in a Wall Street firm and on a Friday you're buying $200 worth of powder cocaine from the local supplier, if you're caught, they say, oh my goodness gracious, such a good man. Well, we're going to teach him a lesson. He's going to have to serve 3 weekends at a soup kitchen, and that'll teach him a lesson. If you're a black kid in the inner city, you buy $200 worth of crack cocaine, you're going to go to prison. You're never going to get a job when you get out. This is a big difference. And an interesting thing on that, in addressing that, a group of us, 5 or 6 senators, we're going to meet with the president tomorrow for about an hour. In this group, we have very conservative Republicans, moderate and liberal Democrats. We're all agree that there's a racial bias in incarceration and sentencing. And we're going to work with the president to see if we can change those laws. Employment, we got to change. I applaud those companies that are working very hard to increase education in inner cities and then to create jobs in inner cities. The same with healthcare. But you should have it the same wherever you are. And we don't, but we can get it better. I think one of the things we have to change are some of our criminal laws and the way they're enforced. You can't have more people locked up in the United States than any other democratic nation in the world. That's not making us safer. It's not helping us.
Yeah.
Thank you. Although I did have a man come up to me here recently, and no, come on forward, come on, in the Northeast Kingdom, and he said, "Do you remember me?" And I said, "I'm sorry, I don't." He said, "Well, I sure remember you. We first met in 1974." And I said, "Well, I wasn't in the Senate in 1974. I was state's attorney." He said, "Yeah. And you threw me in jail, and I've been meaning to talk to you about it." And I thought maybe if he's been worrying about this for over 30 years, it probably was not going to be that comfortable conversation. But these are good questions. You've got good teachers. But I'll tell you this, your teachers have got good students. Do you agree?
I do agree. They're amazing.
Well, I think that it shows what happens. You have good teachers. How large is the school there?
About 100 K to 8.
Well, let's see, when I graduated from high school, we had, I think, 31 in my graduating class. And I had an uncle who said I came from a small town, a small school, I'd probably never amount to anything. After I'd been in the Senate for 5 or 6 years, I asked him what he thought. He said, I haven't changed my mind at all. He disagreed with me politically. But my point is, no matter what size town you're from, or what size school you go, if you really work at learning, if you have good teachers, and you do have good teachers, you're going to succeed. And I would argue that I felt far better off being in a small town because of the small town values. So thank you.
Thank you so much for your time, Senator Leahy.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Take care.
You too. It was a minor pain.